Ethan Cole was already late. If he finished this last delivery on time, he'd make it across town before the after-school program closed and charged him another fee he couldn't afford. If he didn't, well, Lucas would be the last kid sitting on the bench again, swinging his legs and pretending not to care. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel of the battered delivery van, the fuel light blinking like an accusation. Every blink sounded like a number in his head. Rent, groceries, after-school fees, shoes Lucas was about to outgrow. "Hang on, Lucas," he muttered under his breath, more prayer than statement. "Daddy's coming." The navigation app chirped, its calm voice at odds with the knot in his chest, and iron gates rose ahead of him like the mouth of some patient animal. 2 stone lions guarded the entrance, their marble faces indifferent to the rain that streaked their jaws. Hart Estate, the bronze plaque read. Ethan exhaled through his nose. He'd heard the name in the background of commercials, seen it on the side of pill bottles in drugstores when Lucas got sick. Hart Biologics. That Hart. The front gate rolled open after a terse exchange with the intercom. Ethan drove up the long driveway, tires whispering over wet gravel. The mansion reared up in front of him, glass and stone and impossible wealth, lit from within like a ship on dark water. For a moment, with the rain speckling the windshield, it looked like another world behind glass, one where people didn't count coins at gas pumps. He killed the engine and listened to the ticking as it cooled, the rain tapping a steady rhythm on the roof. One last stop. Then he'd get Lucas, microwave something that pretended to be dinner, help with math homework he barely remembered, and fall asleep sitting up like always. He took the keys from the ignition, his fingers lingering on the worn keychain. It was a cheap plastic rocket ship Lucas had picked out from a dollar bin, surreptitiously slipping it onto the counter when Ethan had been counting crumpled bills. "So your car can go zoom," his son had said solemnly. He slung the insulated delivery bag over his shoulder and followed a uniformed maid through tall double doors and stopped dead. The entrance hall looked like it belonged in a museum, veined marble floors that reflected the chandelier light, a staircase that split and curled upward like something out of a movie, chandeliers dripping light instead of crystal. Smoke-colored walls carried framed oil paintings and black-and-white photographs that looked expensive even from a distance. But none of that was what turned his veins to ice. At the far end of the hall, under its own pool of warm white light, hung a portrait. Her. His delivery bag slid off his shoulder and thudded onto the marble, the sound muted by the high ceiling. Anna. The woman in the painting wore a navy gown that caught the light like water. Her hair fell in soft waves over one shoulder, her smile gentle, shy. A faint birthmark kissed her left cheek, one he had traced so many nights with his thumb when she'd fallen asleep on his chest on their lumpy couch, her breath warm against his neck. It was Anna. It had to be Anna. The angle of her chin, the softness at the corners of her mouth, the particular way her eyes seemed to be listening to something beyond the frame. Except it wasn't labeled Anna. The brass plate beneath the frame read, "Evelyn Hart, beloved sister." For a moment Ethan thought he might be sick right there on the polished floor. His ears roared, his vision tunneled. His body remembered the day of the funeral, the smell of damp earth, the cheap coffin, Lucas too small to understand why everyone was crying, his hands numb around a single white rose. This is crazy. It's a coincidence, a look-alike. No, the curve of the jaw, the tilt of her eyes, the way the artist had captured that tiny quirk in her smile like she'd just swallowed a secret. That was not coincidence. That was his wife. A woman he had watched lowered into the ground 3 years ago because he couldn't afford anything better. He took one step toward the painting, then another, the sound of his shoes swallowed by the marble. "Can I help you?" The voice came from his left, sharp enough to cut through the fog in his head. Ethan turned, heart hammering like it wanted out of his chest. A woman in a dark, perfectly tailored suit stood near one of the archways. Late 40s, hair scraped back into a severe bun, pearl earrings that probably cost more than his van. On anyone else, the expression might have been polite curiosity. On her face, it was a mask stretched over something much sharper, like a blade wrapped in silk. Delivery, Ethan said, the word thick on his tongue. For Ms. Hart. Her gaze dipped to the company logo on his jacket, then slid past him to the dropped bag, then to the portrait, and stopped. Every trace of color drained from her face. She took one step back, then another. Her hand groped behind her for the edge of a chair and gripped it so tightly the leather creaked. "Who are you?" It came out almost as a hiss. "Ethan Cole," he said slowly, confused and suddenly afraid. "I'm just the driver." Her eyes were no longer on the logo. They were locked to his face, searching, comparing, measuring, as if she were lining his features up with someone else's in her mind like tracing paper. He felt exposed, like she was peeling back skin and looking straight into the hollows of his bones. "That woman," Ethan forced out, pointing at the painting with a hand that trembled. "That's my wife." The room froze. The ticking of a distant clock became deafening. Somewhere the rain battered the windows harder, as if trying to get in. The woman's lips parted soundlessly. Then she snapped, voice sharp as broken glass. "Marcus!" A side door opened. A large man in a security uniform stepped out, his posture stiff, eyes assessing the way only someone used to throwing people out could manage. His gaze flicked to the bag, to Ethan's hands, to his face. "Get this man out of my house," the woman said, voice low and lethal. "Now!" Marcus started toward him, steps measured but full of intent. "Wait!" Ethan blurted, panic flaring. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just tell me why you have a portrait of my wife in your house. That's all I want. Her name was Anna Cole. She died in a car accident, but that—" His voice cracked. "That is her. You know it is." The woman's grip on the chair faltered. Her composure flickered like a weak bulb. Marcus reached for Ethan's arm, firm but not yet rough. Ethan let himself be steered backward, his mind spinning, his chest trying to decide between collapse and explosion. He had the wild thought that maybe this was some elaborate prank, that any second someone would jump out with a camera. But the terror in the woman's eyes wasn't something you could fake. He was almost at the door when the woman said in a voice that sounded scraped raw, "Wait." Marcus stopped. Ethan turned. The woman stood there, shoulders rigid. The air around her felt electrically charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. "You said she was your wife," she whispered. "And she's dead?" Something in her eyes, not just shock now, but a bone-deep terror, made Ethan's skin prickle. "Yes," he said softly. 3 years. A drunk driver blew a red light. She was gone before the ambulance got there. The woman sagged against the chair. Her knees nearly buckled. Marcus moved toward her on instinct, but she shot out a hand and stopped him without taking her eyes off Ethan. "Is she alive?" she demanded suddenly, voice breaking. "Tell me the truth. Is Evelyn alive?" "I don't know anyone named Evelyn," Ethan said. "My wife's name was Anna." "No," the woman breathed, more to herself than to him. No, that's—" She turned, looking up at the portrait. Her throat moved as she swallowed. When she faced him again, her cheeks were wet. "That's my sister," she said. "Evelyn Hart. She vanished 13 years ago. I've been looking for her ever since." The world tilted. Ethan grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. His breath came in short, useless bursts. He could feel each one scraping his throat. It fit. He hated it, but it fit. No family. No photos from childhood. No stories she was willing to tell. Anna had always changed the subject with that small, sad smile and that one line, "The past doesn't matter, Ethan. Only the life we're building now." He had loved her enough not to pry. He'd thought that was respect. That love meant not asking what someone couldn't bear to say. Now it felt like a blindfold he'd willingly tied himself with. The woman drew herself up slowly, as if every inch hurt. "My name is Eleanor Hart," she said. "This is my home. That portrait was painted when Evelyn was 22. She would be 35 now. Anna had been 32 when she died. The arithmetic lodged in Ethan's chest like a shard of glass. "I don't understand," he said hoarsely. "Why would she change her name? Why would she lie about everything?" Eleanor's eyes hardened. Not at him. At something much older, much bigger. "Because being Evelyn Hart was a cage," she said. "And my mother held the key." She dismissed Marcus with a flick of her fingers and led Ethan down a hushed corridor into a smaller sitting room. Here, the wealth was softer. Shelves of books, a fireplace waiting to be lit, chairs that looked like people actually sat in them. Framed photos on the mantelpiece showed cityscapes, a younger Eleanor receiving awards, but never Evelyn beyond the age in the portrait. Ethan sank into leather that swallowed him whole. His legs still felt like rubber. The delivery bag, forgotten in the hall, might as well have belonged to another life. Eleanor remained standing for a moment, spine ramrod straight against the window, looking out at the manicured gardens like she was studying a battlefield where she'd already lost too much. "When my father died, he left a pharmaceutical empire behind," she began. "Hart Biologics. Our mother worshipped that company more than she worshipped God. I inherited control. Evelyn was supposed to inherit a large share, too." She turned, eyes distant, seeing something far beyond the room. But Evelyn never cared about any of it. She hated the parties, the cameras, the endless scrutiny, the schedules, the way Mother treated us like assets to be managed, not daughters to be loved. She wanted... Eleanor searched for the word, as if it tasted odd on her tongue. Ordinary. Ethan saw Anna standing in their tiny kitchen, laughing as she wiped sauce off the ceiling because Lucas had flung his spoon too hard. Anna in a thrift store dress twirling with Lucas in the living room, music from an old radio crackling. Ordinary. Their whole life had been built out of that word. "When she was 22, Eleanor continued, she fell in love with a man from a working-class family. Do you know what my mother called him? A parasite." Her lip curled. She threatened to cut Evelyn off, to make his life unlivable if Evelyn didn't end it. There were fights, screaming. I tried to protect her, but... She closed her eyes for a moment, lashes wet. And then one morning, she was gone. No credit card use, no calls, no trace. Just a note. "I can't live as a puppet anymore. I'm sorry." Ethan swallowed hard. The note sounded exactly like something Anna would have written. Brief, apologetic, as if her freedom were an inconvenience. His wife had appeared in his life 10 years ago, alone. No history she was willing to share. A waitress at a diner with a laugh big enough to fill the room and a way of looking at him like she was memorizing his face. He had thought he'd found a miracle. He hadn't realized the miracle had come pre-broken. "She told me she grew up in foster care," he said numbly. "Said she never had a real family." "She did," Eleanor said quietly. "It just wasn't safe to claim it." Ethan's hands tightened on his knees until his knuckles blanched. "I have a son," he blurted, because the thought of keeping Lucas out of this felt suddenly impossible. Lucas! He's 6! Something in Eleanor's face shattered. For a heartbeat, her boardroom mask fell away, leaving nothing but raw, aching grief. She had a child, she whispered. I have a nephew. He looks like her, Ethan said. His voice shook. Same eyes, same way of scrunching his nose when he laughs. He's all I have left. Eleanor sat down heavily across from him, as if invisible strings holding her upright had been cut. For a long time, the only sound was the rain tapping on the windows and the faint hum of the house breathing around them. Finally, Ethan said, I need proof. Eleanor looked up. Not because I doubt you, he added quickly. I can't. That portrait... His throat closed. But I need to know I'm not building a whole new life on another lie. If she was really your sister, then Lucas is your nephew. Let's prove it. A DNA test, Eleanor said at once. Like the word had been waiting on her tongue for years. I'll arrange it. You're not going to try to take him away from me? Ethan blurted before he could stop himself. The fear had been coiled there since she said nephew, ready to strike. Eleanor flinched as if he'd struck her. I am a lot of things, Mr. Cole, she said quietly. But I am not my mother. I've already lost my sister. I won't punish the child she left behind. Her voice trembled on the last words. Ethan believed her despite himself. There was too much pain in her eyes to be anything but real. Then we test, he said. And if it confirms what we both already know, she replied, we figure out the rest. Together. The test was done discreetly. A lab technician came to Ethan's cramped apartment 3 days later. Swabbed Lucas's cheek while the boy giggled and asked if it tickled because his DNA was special. The technician smiled, kind and professional. Her kit laid out neatly on their old kitchen table, whose corner was permanently stained with paint from one of Lucas's art projects. Ethan watched, arms folded, trying not to show how much his hands were shaking. Will it hurt? Lucas asked, eyeing the swab. Not at all, she said warmly. You're brave, right? I'm 6, he said solemnly, as if that answered everything. After she left, the apartment felt too quiet. Ethan stood in the doorway of Lucas's room for a long time, watching his son line up toy cars in a perfect row, making whooshing sounds under his breath. Daddy, Lucas said without looking up, is my DNA special? Very, Ethan said, his voice rough. More than you know. He spent the next week moving through his life like a ghost in his own body. He delivered packages, his hands going through familiar motions. He washed dishes. He memorized the pattern of cracks in the van's windshield. He pretended he wasn't counting days in the tightness of his chest. On the 4th day, his phone buzzed during his lunch break. Eleanor Hart. He almost didn't answer. He didn't know if he could handle her voice. Hello? How is Lucas? She asked, skipping any greeting. Her voice was too careful, as if she were afraid of stepping on something fragile. He's fine, Ethan said slowly. Why? I don't know, she admitted. I just wanted to know if he likes anything. Books, toys, dinosaurs. There was a small, helpless laugh. Evelyn loved dinosaurs when she was little. She memorized their Latin names to annoy her tutors. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. He's obsessed with planets, and Triceratops, and asking questions I don't know the answers to. That sounds like her, Eleanor said softly. She never stopped questioning. It drove Mother insane. 2 days later, a package arrived with Lucas's name written in elegant handwriting. Inside were 3 picture books about space, a toy Triceratops, and a note. For Lucas. From someone who loved your mom very much, long before she was your mom. Lucas squealed, hugged the toy, and refused to sleep without it. "Who sent it?" he demanded, eyes wide. "A friend," Ethan said. It was the only word that didn't feel like a lie and a promise at the same time. "Can we meet her?" Lucas asked. "Maybe," Ethan said, and forced a smile that felt too tight at the edges. On the 7th day, the envelope came. Ethan sat in the van with the engine off, the paper weightless and heavy in his hands at the same time. The delivery warehouse buzzed faintly around him, forklifts beeping, someone shouting for a pallet jack. It all sounded far away. It took him 3 tries to tear it open. The language was technical. His eyes snagged on alleles and markers and probability charts. He read the conclusion 3 times before his brain caught up. Relationship between tested individuals is consistent with that of aunt and nephew. Probability 99.9%. His vision blurred. He pressed the paper to his forehead and squeezed his eyes shut, a strangled sound escaping his throat. She had really been Evelyn Hart. A runaway heiress who set fire to her old life just to be free enough to love him, to build something small and honest and messy. He thought of all the times she'd watched the news and quietly turned it off when Heart Biologics came up, of the way she'd tense when they drove past certain neighborhoods, then shake it off and turn the radio up. He dialed before he could talk himself out of it. "Eleanor," he said when she answered. "It's me." Silence hummed between them, dense with everything they weren't saying. "The results came," he said. "He's your nephew." On the other end, Eleanor made a sound that was part sob, part exhale, like someone finally dropping a weight they'd been holding for years. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for telling me." "I'm coming over," Ethan said, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. "Tonight. I want the full truth. No more missing pieces." "I'll have everything ready," she said. "Photo albums, files, whatever you want. Just drive safely." The second time Ethan walked into the Hart mansion, the staff didn't look at him like an intruder. Security at the gate waved him through. The front door opened before he knocked. Eleanor wasn't in a suit this time. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders. Without the armor, she looked less like a CEO and more like what she really was underneath, a sister who'd been grieving for 13 years. The coffee table in the sitting room was buried under photo albums and boxes. Dust motes danced in the lamplight above them, disturbed by the upheaval. "I dug everything out of storage," she said. "I thought I'd burned most of it in my head. Turns out I just buried it." The first album showed 2 little girls in matching dresses. The older one carried the cool poise that would harden into Eleanor's boardroom gaze. The younger, Evelyn, was all star-bright eyes and messy hair ribbons, laughter caught mid-flight. Ethan stared. It was like watching Anna's features being sculpted in slow motion by time. "That's her," he said, unable to keep the tremor out of his voice. "She used to call this place the museum," Eleanor said quietly. "She said nothing here ever changed. Not the furniture, not the rules, not Mother's expectations." With each page, Evelyn aged. The dresses grew more expensive, the parties grander, the smiles thinner. In one photo, Evelyn stood between her parents at a gala, jewels heavy at her throat, her eyes distant. "When she started sneaking out," Eleanor said, turning to a photo where Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes at all, "I covered for her. Told Mother she was at the library or at extra tutoring. I thought she just wanted air. I didn't know she was falling in love." "She told me she was a college student," Ethan said. "Met her at this greasy spoon downtown. She was sitting there with a notebook and a coffee that had gone cold. She looked terrified and free at the same time." Eleanor's mouth twitched. "That sounds like her first day doing anything she actually wanted." For a moment, they sat with that image. a girl from a marble museum of a house in a cheap diner, choosing a chipped mug over crystal. They kept turning pages, kept matching stories, kept stitching together the girl Evelyn had been with the woman Anna became. Then Eleanor opened a small wooden box. "Mother had her room cleared out after she disappeared," she said. "I couldn't bring myself to look through this. Not until now." Inside were small things: a cheap beaded bracelet, ticket stubs, a dried flower pressed between tissue. At the bottom lay a slim leather journal. Ethan knew the handwriting on the first page before he even focused on the words. The loops and slants he'd seen on grocery lists, love notes tucked into his lunch, sticky notes on the fridge. "Buy milk. And also remember you're doing great." It was Anna's. Eleanor sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the tension in her shoulders, and turned to the last entries, the ones from the weeks before Evelyn vanished. "Met him again today. Ethan. He doesn't know who I really am. And for once, I don't feel like I'm lying. I feel like I'm starting over." Ethan's breath hitched. "Mother says she'll destroy him if I don't end it. Says she'll have his life torn apart piece by piece. I heard her making calls. She means it." His stomach turned. He imagined a younger version of himself, a delivery driver who didn't even know he was on someone's hit list. "I thought choosing love would feel like running toward something. Instead, it feels like jumping off a cliff and hoping he'll catch me without even knowing I'm falling. I have to go. I have to become someone else before she turns him into collateral damage. If I stay, she'll break him. If I leave, I might break me. But I think I know what I'm going to choose." The last page blurred as Ethan's eyes filled. "She chose you," Eleanor said hoarsely. "She chose the chance of a small, fragile life with you over a guaranteed gilded cage here." He shot to his feet. The walls felt too close, the air too rich. "I should have known," he said, pacing. "Should have pushed, asked more questions. I thought respecting her meant not digging." "She didn't want you to dig," Eleanor replied, standing as well. Her voice was rough but steady. "She wanted, for once in her life, to be loved without a ledger. You gave her that. If you'd pushed, she would have run again. Only this time, she'd have been running from both of us." When he looked at her, there was something new in her eyes. Not just grief, not just gratitude, recognition. Of someone who had been living with the same hole in their chest from different angles. They were standing too close. The journal lay open on the couch between the indentations where they'd been sitting, like a bridge. "Thank you," Eleanor said, "for giving her what I never could. Freedom." "Thank you," Ethan replied quietly, "for telling me who she really was." Their hands brushed as they both reached for the journal to close it. They didn't pull away. For a few suspended seconds, the air shifted. The room narrowed down to the warmth of skin against skin and the thud of blood in their ears. Ethan saw the flecks of gold in Eleanor's eyes. She saw the carved lines of exhaustion around his mouth, the way they sparked when he smiled at the memory of Lucas. He leaned forward, just a fraction. So did she. Their lips were a breath away when something inside Ethan screamed. "Anna." He flinched back like burned. The coffee table tipped. The journal slapped to the floor, pages fanning out like a startled bird. "I can't," he stammered. "God, Anna, this is—" "Wrong," Eleanor finished, face crumpling. She covered it with her hands. I know. She was my sister. You were her husband. I don't know what I was thinking." He grabbed his jacket with shaking hands. "I need time," he said from the doorway. "To think, to breathe, to not do something we can't undo." "I understand," she whispered, though her voice said it would destroy her. He left. sat in his van in the Hart driveway until his vision stopped spinning, watching the rain bead and race each other down the windshield, then drove home on autopilot. For 3 weeks, he didn't answer when she called. He tried to live as if nothing had changed. He packed lunches. He double-parked the van and sprinted up apartment stairs with boxes. He heated canned soup and called it dinner. He sorted laundry. He lay awake at night staring at the ceiling while Lucas snored softly in the next room, the glow-in-the-dark stars they'd stuck there years ago faintly green above him. He told himself distance was cleaner, safer, that his job was to protect Lucas and Anna's memory, not to complicate it with feelings he didn't know what to do with. Then at the dinner table one night, Lucas looked up from his macaroni and said, "Why doesn't Aunt Eleanor visit anymore? Did I do something wrong?" The fork slipped from Ethan's hand and clattered against the plate. "No, buddy," he said quickly. "You didn't do anything." "Then why?" Lucas persisted, brow furrowing. "She reads the dinosaur names right. You don't." He scrunched his nose in that way that was pure Anna. "And she brings the books back on time. You forget." Ethan tried to laugh. It sounded strangled. "Grown-ups are complicated," he said weakly. "She's busy." Lucas stared at him with Anna's eyes. He didn't believe it. But he let it go, turning his attention back to making the noodles into a volcano. That night, Ethan lay awake listening to the rain and realized something ugly. He missed Eleanor, not as the billionaire, not as the distant name on bottles in the drugstore, but as the woman who sat cross-legged on his worn couch, in a sweater that smelled faintly of jasmine and paper, reading his son's favorite bedtime story like it was the most important business deal she'd ever negotiated. As the woman who had cried over a journal and called his wife M like a nickname for a piece of her own heart. He hated himself for it. Eleanor fared no better. She spent 12-hour days buried in contracts and board fights, her expression once again carved out of marble. Hart Biologics was under pressure. A new drug trial going sideways, investors demanding blood, headlines questioning ethics. Normally, she would have thrived on the challenge, wielding numbers like weapons. Now it all felt like noise. At night, she sat alone in the sitting room where she and Ethan had almost destroyed themselves. The journal lay on the table, closed but not put away. Evelyn's portrait watched her from the wall, the painted gaze softer than she remembered. "What would you want, Em?" she whispered one evening, voice rough. "What do you want me to do with this?" The painted woman did not answer. The silence pressed in. Eleanor opened the journal again. Her eyes found the line Evelyn had written about choosing love, even if it meant jumping off a cliff. "You picked your cliff," Eleanor murmured. "Now I have to pick mine." She closed her eyes and let herself admit, for the first time without arguments or excuses, the truth she'd been circling. She loved Ethan. Not just because he was a piece of Evelyn, not just because he carried her grief in ways that made her feel less alone. She loved him. The way he always bent down to Lucas's level. The way he apologized to waitstaff when board members snapped at them. The way exhaustion sat heavy on him, but he still found a joke for his son. The way, in her house full of people paid to serve her, he was the only one who had ever looked at her like a person first and a CEO second. It was wrong. It was complicated. It was real. And she had no idea what to do with that. The fourth Sunday after the almost kiss, Ethan woke before dawn to a quiet apartment and a chest that felt hollowed out. He stared at the ceiling. The glow-in-the-dark stars had started to peel at the edges. He couldn't live in this half-life forever. Half loyal to a ghost, half tethered to a living woman he wouldn't let himself reach for. Grief had kept him in a holding pattern for 3 years. Meeting Eleanor had made him realize how stuck he really was. "Do you want to visit Mommy today?" he heard himself ask over breakfast, voice too casual. Lucas's head jerked up, milk mustache bright on his upper lip. Really? Really? They drove to the small cemetery on the edge of town. The clouds were breaking, early sunlight slanting through in hard, bright beams. The world smelled like wet grass and stone. Anna's grave was under a maple tree. Ethan had picked it because she loved trees, said they made her feel like the sky was less far away. On the day they'd chosen the plot, he'd stood there numb while the funeral director talked about options, and the only thing he'd been able to think was, she liked trees. Lucas ran ahead, the toy triceratops gripped in one small hand. He dropped to his knees in front of the simple stone and traced the letters of her name with careful fingers. "Hi, Mommy," he said softly. "I brought Daddy and Dino." Ethan knelt beside him. The grass was damp through his jeans, soaking cold into his knees. "Hey, Anna," he said, throat thick. "I'm late. Again." They sat in silence for a while. The wind moved in the maple leaves overhead, making a sound like whispers. Somewhere, a bird called. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind them. Ethan turned, heart already pounding even before his eyes confirmed what they knew. Eleanor. She stood a few feet away, caught mid-step, as if she'd been about to retreat. Her hair was loose, sweater sleeves pushed up like she'd dressed in a hurry, like coming here had been a decision she was afraid to give herself time to reconsider. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said quickly. "I can leave." Lucas looked up, his face lighting. "Aunt Eleanor!" Ethan's chest twisted. "No," he said. "You don't have to go." Eleanor's gaze flicked from him to the headstone. Very carefully. Like approaching an altar, she came forward and knelt opposite them. "Hi, Em," she whispered to the rock bearing the name Anna Cole, not Evelyn Hart. Her fingers trembled as she touched the edge of the stone. "It's Eleanor, your very late, very stupid sister." Tears spilled over. "I'm sorry it took me so long," she choked. "I didn't know where you were, and when I found out, I said the wrong things. Did the wrong things, like always. I should have found you sooner. I should have been braver. I should have been the one to run with you." Lucas reached out and grabbed her hand. She clutched it like it was the only thing saving her from drowning. "I miss you," she whispered. "And I found them, Em. Ethan and Lucas. They're wonderful. You were so happy with them." "He tells me stories, and it's like seeing you alive again in every word." She looked at Ethan across the grave, eyes red and shining. "I came here to ask you something," she said, voice raw. "And I hate that I can't ask you to your face." She turned back to the stone. "If you'd be angry," she whispered. "If you'd hate me. Because I—" She swallowed, the word sticking. "Because I have feelings for Ethan. I didn't go looking for them. I tried to suffocate them. I've done nothing but fight them. But they're there, and I don't know if loving him is honoring you or betraying you. And I need— God, I need—" She broke off, shoulders shaking. Ethan stared at the name carved into the granite until the letters blurred. "I've been thinking about it too," he said quietly. "Every day. Every night. I feel guilty just wanting to be near her. Like every time I laugh with her, I'm erasing you." He looked up at Eleanor. "But I found a letter in your things," he said. "You wrote that if anything ever happened to you, you wanted me to find someone else. To make sure Lucas had a family, not just a father trying not to drown. I thought I'd never be able to do that. Then I met the only person in the world who misses you the way I do." Eleanor's tears fell onto the grass. "I love him because he's a piece of you," she said. But I also love him because he's him. And I love Lucas because he's part of both of you. Not as some heir or asset, as my nephew, as the only miracle you left behind." They fell silent. Even the birds seemed to hush. Then Lucas said, in that clear, matter-of-fact tone only children seem to manage, "Mommy's not mad." Both adults looked at him. He shrugged, small shoulders lifting. "I can feel it. She's happy. She doesn't like it when you're sad all the time. She likes when people laugh." A laugh sob broke out of Eleanor. Ethan closed his eyes, a tear slipping free. Of course she would send the message through him, he muttered. He opened them again and looked at the stone. "I don't know if this is right," he admitted. "But I know one thing. You didn't burn your old life down, just so we would live in ashes, too. You chose to live, to love, to risk everything. You'd want us to do the same." The wind stirred the maple leaves above, a soft rustling like someone turning pages. Slowly, Eleanor held out her free hand across the grave. Ethan stared at it. Then he put his hand in hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, 3 people linked in an imperfect circle around a fourth who wasn't there and yet somehow was everywhere. Eventually, they stood. "Thank you," Ethan said to the stone, "for choosing me, for giving me Lucas, for every ordinary day you fought to make ours." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, "for being braver than I was, for showing me that it's allowed to want something different." They walked back toward the parking lot together, Lucas in between them, clutching both hands, swinging their arms like a bridge he refused to let sag. "Can Aunt Eleanor come to lunch?" Lucas asked suddenly, bouncing. "Please?" Ethan and Eleanor exchanged a long look, years of grief and a new, fragile hope sitting between them. "We should start slow," Ethan said at last, carefully. "As friends. No almost kisses. No disappearing for weeks. Just getting to know each other without all the lies and ghosts in the way." Eleanor nodded, a real, fragile smile forming. "Friends," she agreed. "I think I can do that." "Good," Ethan said, "because he hasn't stopped asking about you, and my dinosaur pronunciation is terrible." She laughed, the sound light and shaky but real. "I've missed him," she said. "And you. Both of you." They reached the cars. Lucas squeezed their hands once more before scrambling into the back of Ethan's van, buckling himself in with the seriousness of a pilot. "Lunch?" Eleanor asked. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Lunch." As he pulled out of the lot, he glanced in the rearview mirror. He couldn't see the grave, but something in his chest felt looser. Less like a wound, more like a scar that could finally bear the touch. Behind them, Eleanor's sleek car followed, no longer a symbol of a world apart, but of a life that might, somehow, meet theirs in the middle. Ahead lay a future that was messy and complicated, and nothing either of them had planned for. Not lovers. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But 2 people who had loved the same woman, who now loved the boy she left behind, who had decided at last to stop letting grief be the only language they spoke. Above the cemetery, the wind shifted through the maple tree, and if you believed that love could outlast names, lies, and even death, you might have heard it, a soft, familiar laugh moving through the leaves, finally at peace.